It's time for another episode of The Sean Tabbitt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, dig into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Father Mike Driscoll, and we're going to be discussing his book, Demons, Deliverance, Discernment, Separating Fact from Fiction about the Spirit World. Mike, it is truly an honor, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you. I didn't even ask you. This is we can see each other. Is that how the recording is too? People can see me? Okay.
Yes.
That's good for me to know. Good morning, everyone.
Oh, Mike, I've been looking forward to having this conversation. As my audience is well aware, I have just been going down the rabbit hole, talking to people about deliverance and exorcism and all the related topics. So I came across your book and wanted the audience to connect with you and hear about your resource as well. I want to get to the book here in a couple of minutes, but first, I'd love to kick this off by having you share a bit of the Mike Driscoll origin story. So for the men and women meeting you for the first time today, give them a little bit of context. What are a few things they should know about you?
Born and raised Peoria, Illinois, and we were talking. Went to University of Illinois, was economics, and planned to go to law school, but ended up going as of senior year. Visited seminary, so went to seminary. Was ordained a priest in 1992. Next month, we're in April. Next month will be 30 years. I've been a Catholic priest for the Diocese of Peoria, and as far as the book. 2006. At that time, I was started studying counseling at Bradley University in Peoria. Started a counseling degree. It took a few years. Got a master's degree. Went on for a PhD in counseling. Excuse me. And went to Regent University. Some of your listeners may be familiar with that. It's a non-denominational Christian university in Virginia Beach. So did some of that online and some of that went out there each summer. And when time came, start thinking about a dissertation. Talked to one of my instructors. I talked to a priest I know who's done some exorcisms and thinking about the counseling degree, I talked to this instructor who I liked, wanted to work with, and said, I've got this idea. How Catholic exorcists distinguish between demon possession and mental disorders. And his eyes got kind of wide, and he said, yeah, I want to hear about that. So that was how I ended up doing a dissertation under that title, How Do Catholic Exorcists Distinguish Between Demon Possession and Mental Disorders? And after I completed that and the degree, then wrote a book and submitted that to Catholic Answers with the publisher. So that's where that book came from the counseling background, but also obviously because I'm a priest with a Catholic theology background.
And in terms of kind of making that connection with kind of the priest and counseling background to exorcism, like did it simply come together in the terms of your dissertation, or was that kind of a normal part of your ministry work as well? I'm curious where that all kind of those paths converge for you.
If I understand your question, a lot of priests would go through the priesthood as pastors of churches, which I was and I am again now. But the bishop at one point assigned me to be hospital chaplain, so that led me a little bit more of the health and a little bit around. More than most priests would be around that. Priests, all priests are going to be visiting a hospital a little bit, but I've been full-time chaplain for 19 years now. Part of that time as being a pastor in addition. Is that what you were asking, Sean?
No, well,
yeah.
Yes and no. We'll keep pulling on the thread. I'm always curious, and in terms of exorcism, demonic, like that's a special space, a special topic. Was that solely a part of your research, or was that also kind of a ministry focus for you ever in your journey?
Okay. No, it was not really. Again, any priest gets calls occasionally, and I've gotten a lot more since the book, and the diocese and other priests will often refer people to me just because I've studied the mental health aspect, and in doing the dissertation, read more on demonology than we do in the seminary. But no, before that, not really. So I kind of came in through a back way. I wasn't like, hey, I want to learn about demons. It's actually interesting that it was just a few conversations with a priest that gave me that idea while I happened to be studying counseling. So no, when I first wanted to study counseling, a large thing in my mind, which still is, people struggling in marriages. And I wanted to see if I could be a little bit better at helping. So some of the classes did help with that. So nope, that was not necessarily the plan at all when I started this master's degree, not at all.
And in terms of the book, we had talked a little bit about this before we jumped into the interview. If we contrast when your book came out to now, like the publishing landscape on exorcism, demonic, deliverance, kind of everything that kind of fits under that umbrella, uh, it's kind of exploded. And on the other hand, if folks have listened to earlier interviews I've done, kind of in this space, it seems like the need in this area has just grown greatly in culture. So, uh, in terms of the landscape since your book came out and need that you see in the culture in terms of people dealing with demonic issues, like what has shifted from when your book first came out to now?
I don't think I see it the way that some others would. I'm not sure that, um, as far as the extraordinary activity of the devil, meaning something like possession or close to it, a haunted house. I don't say that mocking. If there's something really going on, I don't believe it's a dead human being wandering around. I believe it's the devil causing mischief. I don't know that that's increased. And I don't know how political your show is. So you say, oh, we don't go down that road. I get it. But um, I mean, how does the Bible begin? I mean, God creates, and God creates the male and female, and He says, "Be fertile and multiply." We're talking a little bit about how you made a joke about how Catholic used to be reputation for having lots of children. That's not the reputation overall anymore in the United States, anyway. Some other cultures, maybe. So I think the work of the devil has exploded in the last, let's say, 50 years in those ways, questioning the very roots. Can you teach in a school? Well, God created the world. You can't say that in public school. My dad, by the way, full disclosure, my dad's God rest his soul, he died some years ago. Public school teacher. That's what I was raised on. My dad's, public school teacher, as was my brother's career. Um, but yeah, you can't say something like that. Male and female. I don't know if you can say that anymore in public school. No, God created people male. They're only male and female. I don't know. Would you get fired? Um, Marriage between man and woman, not just the very roots. That's where I see the devil working, the very roots of what God did. The extraordinary stuff, I don't know. I feel like those are, one exorcist said, called it uh, like a sideshow or something. He said static and noise, the devil just trying to get attention from the real serious things. Really, you're Lucifer. You want to be like God, and you're going to go around a house rattling things and causing electronic disturbances. If he's doing that, and I think he probably is sometimes. I've not personally seen it. I think it's rare, but enough people say it. I take their word for it. He does it sometimes. Why would you do that? You really the possibly the most powerful angel, God's most powerful creature, and you're going to do that? Why? Well, I guess a distraction from the real work of corrupting the world and trying to, get souls to hell.
Well, I think you are right that a lot of this can be a distraction in terms of the cultural conversation, cultural influences, as people have often shifted away from the church, as we've seen a lot of interesting interesting worldview shifts, where people are having their worldviews informed more by popular culture, be it TV, films, comic books, video games, all these different things. And yet at the same time, we are spiritual beings. That's how God created us. And so I feel like so many people have this spiritual void that they're longing to fill. And, I think evidence of that is, go to the Travel Channel, History Channel, some of these other channels on, cable and satellite networks. You've got ghost hunting shows and
Just going to talk about all those shows. Yeah.
everything in between. So I feel like it's scratching an itch, and is some of it goofy? Is some of it made up? Likely, it's TV. Is some of it real? It's possible. Yet, people won't pick up a Bible and read. Yet they'll try to, they'll watch that, and that really impacts kind of their understanding of spiritual things. In terms of, kind of that never-ending battle, so to speak, over humanity between God and the devil, if you will. Often in TV shows or in films, the devil is just painted as this all-powerful being, and it's always the priest or the pastor or God seems to always be coming up short in so many of these stories. And so it is fascinating how culture, through all these different art forms, paints a particular worldview that for me, it feels kind of upside down and backwards. I guess I'd love to just get your thoughts in terms of, things like the TV shows we mentioned, or all these crazy films about demons and exorcisms, and you name it. How does that warp people's views?
That's interesting that like the Exorcist, what was that, early 70s, and Rosemary's Baby, was that also early 70s, about the same time? I think those were only two quote unquote demon movies out at the time, and maybe the only two that had been really in decades, or maybe a couple more. I'm not a film buff really, but their name is Legion now. How many of those are out there? So that's kind of, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, it seems like it maybe means a lot of people believe there is a devil, and hopefully that's the secondarily to believing there is God. So there's that part of it. I, kind of long for the good old days of Ghostbusters. That movie, like, that's fine. Good. Yes, make fun of the idea. We'd rather see that than. And when you talk about the another big one, Poltergeist, that might have been 70s. I watched that I don't know if I ever watched it back then. Watched it a few years ago or so. I was surprised how much of what is in there I hear from people. Like, well, it's, telling this, I think we had to go. So I was telling it to go to the light. Like, I don't know that if you're Bible-based Christian, there's nothing in there that says God's going to have a soul hang around until someone tells it to go to the light. What? But that was in that movie. I know a couple of times I've heard, well, I think animals can sense those things. I think you got that from Poltergeist. It was a surprising number of things that came out of that movie. I was thinking there was one more, but so some of those movies could have a big influence. The Exorcist did, I guess, and it was they had a priest or two apparently helping with that movie. And I remember reading the priest talking about it, saying he wasn't totally happy with it, but I don't know how much you want to go into that. But the ritual of exorcism for the church, which goes back, Bible based, and then goes back in a published form shortly after the printing press. It's got a few signs that it says to look for, and those signs were in the movie The Exorcist. So that's kind of interesting. They did follow those. They made it more dramatic, especially with the head spinning around. But like that sign, the ritual of exorcism says the priest should look for some powers beyond nature. So, maybe if a person, as in that movie, levitates and blasphemes. I heard an exorcist say he'd seen that one time. No one I know has seen a head spin around. So they dramatized, but that would be something from the devil, that to be able to cause a body to do something it couldn't do under a normal, when a human soul is in control of it. So yeah, I guess the movies, I think, have dramatized it to scare some people into believing in God. I guess that would be a good effect, but
yeah, it certainly makes an impression on people. This is more a commentary point than a question you need to answer. But I, as a guy who works in Christian publishing, I heavily monitor, in terms of trade journals and just, stuff related to like the religious publishing space. And it is quite fascinating to watch how you are seeing witchcraft and kind of new age content dominate some of those spaces in a way that we've never seen in years past. Again, I think also scratching that itch and helping people. Well, I don't know if helping people is not the best way to say it. Filling a spiritual void for people where they're desperate to have something in there. DIY witchcraft kits. You can legitimately go down to a Barnes and Noble or order on Amazon a kit with a plastic pentagram and all this. Literally to start going into witchcraft tomorrow, which just seems ridiculous to say. But so just as a guy who's been in the Christian publishing space for a decade, to watch how some of these, witchcraft and other topics like that sort of carving out a space in the religious almost getting legitimate kind of representation in publishing as proper religion or religious publishing is kind of crazy. 15, 20 years ago, that it was barely on the radar, at least in my space.
Yeah. As an aside, you can get, I don't have one, you can get an app that will help you. Whatever, the EV, whatever, the Ghostbuster thing, looking for spirits. You can get an app that will help you to do that, or more than one app, I guess.
Oh,
The kind
yes.
of makes vehicle electronics that they will carry around. You don't need to get a big thing anymore. You can get an app for it. From what I've read, I don't have one. Yes, again, I think the main danger of those things is not. I would believe that, yeah, a person goes down those paths, are you more likely to end up possessed? Yes. Having said that, possession is so extremely rare. I never have seen the signs of a person possessed that we would define. And there's a little bit of wiggle room even in the Catholic definition of it, but I've never seen anything outside the laws of nature. So I've never believed that I have seen a person's body under the control of a demonic spirit, of a demon. So so I think if someone were to say, well, you go down that path of witchcraft or Ouija board or even Satanism, you're more likely to end up possessed. Yes, I think that's true. I think that likelihood is still very extremely small. The greater danger, God didn't possess Eve. I mean, God, the devil did not, God created it. I mean, the devil did not possess Eve. And look at that. That would be great, wouldn't it? So temptation. And so people who are doing that are more, likely to lose their soul, not necessarily by being possessed, but you're not worshiping God. What is this? What are you doing? Where are you getting these rules of to live by? And what do you think your soul is going to happen to your soul after you die? So I guess again, I look at less of the extraordinary effect of that and more the ordinary effect, you know, like Adam and Eve, you know, didn't get
Yeah.
possessed, but it was a disaster.
Well, and I think what you're getting at is I think the day-to-day work of Satan and demons, so to speak, in our lives is often a lot more subtle, and things like
Absolutely, I
temptation
think
and
so.
just as opposed to the extraordinary things that are again on the silver screen, so to speak, are made to look really large. But again, if you have friends who do ministry in this space, those extreme cases of like the 90-pound grandmother throwing the piano or people levitating, or if somebody has an experience like that, they'll tell you, I've only seen that once throughout often, decades of ministry. Like the extreme, the crazy, that seems to be fairly rare.
Right. So I'm those who think they're seeing it more, and I've talked to them too. I just think they're mistaken. I know the ones that I talk to are seem very good, sincere people, including I've talked to exorcists, so I think see that a lot more than I would. They would look at the same thing and say, I think these are signs of possession. I wouldn't. I want to see something outside the laws of nature. There's a little bit of wiggle room, as I said, as one in the church, Catholic Church, as one priest said, we don't have a roadmap to the other side. So there's a little bit of guesswork there. Jesus knew because he knew when someone was possessed. We have to go by a little bit of, go by some signs. Yeah, but as you were talking about that you said that publishing space taking up the spiritual instead of religion. We've got this stuff. Religion by definition, whether it involves the worship of God. So a Muslim, well, I'm going to disagree with him, but he's still got a set of laws that he believes came from elsewhere that he is to follow. And so do we, and so do the Jews. And you can sure find other religions. This whole when people say I'm not religious, it's spiritual. What I get is what I'm hearing is I believe there's something more than just the physical world, but I don't want to be responsible to anyone there. I want to be able to, come up with my own rules. There's something to be said for a set of rules that we believe are given by God, rather than just, oh well, I'll be a witch, and who's setting your parameters? What makes good and evil for you? Well, yeah, I guess you make it up, and then of course we don't go by the Ten Commandments. Then we get this whole thing in our society of just making up morality, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to male and female, those things they've just, oh, well, they're 10 years old and now you better believe them or you're, hateful and et cetera, et cetera. We know where that goes.
Yeah, that's probably been one of the most surprising things, just in uh, encountering people who didn't necessarily grow up in the church, or didn't have the benefit of going to Bible college or seminary. I'm amazed at people who don't realize they have a worldview. Like you talk about, well, you have a lens and a grid through which you view everything, and you were informed as to the rules of how you understand the world operates and how God operates. Everybody has some kind of a concept that they're applying there,
Absolutely.
and that's this foreign concept to so many people. Where I was just like, this has been so second nature for me, just based on coming up in the church, and like even another this is a rabbit trail, but if I contrast, like I grew up Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod, and catechism, confirmation, all that kind of stuff, and getting kind of a basic understanding in theology and doctrine. And it's been interesting to now in this latter part of my faith journey and just whatever, being in more evangelical leaning sides of the church where, you often don't have sort of those milestones that you have in more liturgical settings. And so, people don't even know what a catechism is. They've never actually studied creeds or church history or any of these things that are extremely helpful in terms of informing your worldview, understanding at a basic level how God set up the world, and so there's again kind of going back to sort of the spiritual void or a worldview void. Something will fill that space, and so
Right.
those are things that I'm so appreciative that I got to have those growing up, because a lot of the church has lost that overall.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is that everyone has a worldview, and it's funny when someone say, "Well, I'm just doing things objectively." Well, yeah, I want some objectivity. I do want 2 + 2 = 4, but yeah, we all, of course, we all have a worldview, including the one who says he doesn't. Um, yeah, yeah,
Well, I think the place I'd love to go next in terms of kind of contrasting that is this, if somebody would come to you and say, I'm having these problems, how would you distinguish between, is this a health issue, a mental health issue, or is it the work of the demonic? Just given your psychology background, what are some of the ways you might coach or encourage somebody to discern whether it's this or whether it's that? Because I feel like people often go to the extreme of, oh my gosh, I'm having I think this is a demonic issue, and it just based on previous conversations I've had and just our conversation so far. Again, some of those extremes seem to be rare.
yeah. I'm the hospital where I'm chaplain now. That'll be 10 years this summer. So I've been there 10 years. We do have a mental health unit, so whatever, we have about 20 beds there. So almost a daily basis, I'm talking to people with the whole range. It might be someone struggling with some anxiety, depression, some of the more common things, or it might be a severe schizophrenia. And so that's one place where I do meet people struggling with talking about demons. And then sometimes you just get the call, like I said, the kind of the haunted house thing. That people say, yeah, I don't usually believe in this, but something going on in our house or whatever. So, um, and then you get sometimes, again, whichever setting or a phone call, a person saying, I think I'm possessed, or I think my friend has got a devil in them or something. So I'll have a conversation. I'll talk about, well, possession is I'm a Catholic priest, so here's what I go by possession, and talk about, and to give you briefly what the signs of possession in the Roman ritual that goes back to, like I said, published shortly after the printing press. That would be around the 1600, but verbal form, tradition going back to the Bible. But so knowledge of hidden or distant events. So if you start telling me here, blaspheming and telling me about sins, then I've never met you, Sean, until right now. Okay, he shouldn't know that. So a demon must be possessing him, using his vocal cords to do that. You start blaspheming in a language that you don't know. If you want to find out if you do know that language. But if you don't, okay, that seems like a devil too. And as we said, the things that seem physically unnatural. So sometimes I'll tell people those. I'll say, well, okay, here's what I would go by possession. You have none of those problems, though. And they say, no, no, not that. But okay, yeah, tell me what you've got going on, because I'll tell them um, it, it, demonic attacks, is if we want to call them that. We'd say Catholic faith, and a lot of Christians, I think, would say kind of a spectrum on the most, and not a spectrum of danger, because temptation is just as dangerous. What got Eve, and Adam followed. But a spectrum of how extraordinary, how dramatic. Temptation, as you mentioned, very subtle, and I believe happens a lot. So I'd say, so devil's bothering you? Sure, I'm sure he is. Let's see where on the spectrum we are. So go through the possession. Okay, it's not that. Okay, good. So I'm not going to call the bishop and see if we can get an exorcist here, because you're not showing that, you're not describing the devil possessing your body and moving your vocal cords. Okay. Um, but you think it's more than a temptation to sin, because we all have those. So then there's this area in the Catholic Church, we don't really define it, but we know it's there. We'd say that does the devil have the power to, like we'd say, as far as objects and places, cause mischief? Yeah, seems like it. Gosh, the Gerasene demoniac, devil, Jesus said to the devil, "Out with you." Went into the pigs and ran them off a cliff. And what's that about? Because he's destructive. That's why, doesn't have a reason. So there's that. And there's also sometimes the phrase obsession, not a Catholic term specifically, but we use it sometimes just to, I kind of think of it as temptation on steroids almost, or very similar to obsession in mental health. In other words, if the person just seems bombarded and can't get and the devil is telling you this and this, could it be mental health? Could it be the devil? They don't have to be mutually exclusive. I presume the devil will pick on a person's weak points. And if that's a weak point, well, I presume he's going to do that even worse. When you hear these, some horrible crime and a person says, well, I'm hearing these voices kept telling me to kill whoever. Was the devil involved in that? I think so. Is he the primary cause? I generally don't think so. I generally think that, wow, this person had a problem in their brain. That's a horrible problem. Do I think the devil played on it? Yeah, I do. So I'll have that conversation with a person. Where do we think we are here? Oh, you've got the mischief thing going on. Okay, well then or if you're in my area, or if, you're not in my area, why don't I call a priest and have your house blessed? Nothing magical about that, nothing superstitious about that. If I can throw in a brief explanation of holy water, sometimes I'll joke with, I'll say, now this will keep the vampires away, people laugh at it. Holy water, one time someone in the hospital saw me filling up from the tap. He said, "That's all your holy water is?" Well, yeah, it's water. But then I'm going to say a prayer here, condensing the prayer. God, wherever I sprinkle this water, please spread your protection and blessings. So it's a prayer. It's not that I had a special spring. So I'll do those things. I'll sprinkle holy water. I'll tell people what this is a prayer. I've said a prayer. I've asked God to do this, and we'll pray more. If it's their house, we'll bless their house. Again, same thing, a house blessing. Have a church, because we go so far back, we have official rituals for these. And because I'm an ordained priest, believe there's some, I don't know if I wouldn't want to say there's more power. I'm an official representative of the church. So in some special way, I've got the whole, because my sacrament of holy orders, when I give a house blessing, it's the whole church in some way, in a special way, present there. Not that the church isn't there if it's anyone doing it, and anyone should. It's just there might be something special about that, since I'm the representative of the church using the official ritual. But all prayers are going to be good, we believe. So what's the problem? A house or something? Okay, let's bless that place. And it's something going on with you. Let's pray with you and that. And then always a chance to evangelize. Hey, you don't have to tell me anything, but you've called me. What's your moral life like? You're living with someone outside of marriage. Naturally, I don't think that's a good thing. They're looking at a priest. They know you're not going to say good idea. So you might think about that. What's your prayer life? How's your prayer life? Any drugs or alcohol in your life? So then you'll go down that list again. Never mind the mischief. Never mind the lights flickering or the sounds. Devil or not, I don't know. Let's pray for protection about that. What is your spiritual life like?
Well, and I think that's sometimes one of the answers people get disappointed with in these sorts of conversations, in terms of, how do you fight back? How can I develop normal rhythms in my life to hold back the demonic? And often the answer is living the normal Christian life, spending time reading your Bible, spending time in prayer, and pursuing practicing your faith in your church community. Obviously, me and my charismatic context is going to be a little bit different from you and your Catholic context, but pursuing God and, living a life that is marked by moving towards Him and not away from Him, so to speak, with the life choices that you're making. I find people are often looking for, and I don't mean this literally, but can you just give me a magical incantation or say a prayer over me, and it just fixes everything instantly? They want that microwave fix, and it's often a life marked by choices and spiritual discipline and moving in a direction that over a life you experience those changes. And does God sometimes move in an instant, heal something in an instant, change something in a moment? Yes, I've seen that many times. But at the same time, there's this whole process of just being on the journey and living the normal Christian life. And people want the quick fix, and they're not so much attracted to that longer road.
I think that's a lot of movies and TV shows, isn't it? Where you got to find the right thing. And so people sometimes have called a different priest to try to find. The Catholic Church doesn't have any. The closest thing we would have to a hidden ritual would be the rite of exorcism. I guess at one point, I don't know, it just probably wasn't that, you know, you didn't go to the bookstore and buy it. Look it up online now. I mean, like everything else. So we don't have a hidden ritual. Like you got to find the right priest who has this ritual to take care of your demon problem. We don't hide those rituals. Those, by definition, are rituals for public worship. Some more public than others. We don't call it an assembly to do an exorcism, but you are supposed to have a few people there. Yeah. So yes, people are looking for that. I guess from the well, human nature, we want a quick fix. That's part of it, I'm sure. And then because of the stuff that is out there, finding the magical solution to the devil, but it's not that kind of a thing. Well, the rite of exorcism, it's got 3 exorcisms within it, as we would say, and by that I mean, what's the difference? A technical difference between a prayer and an exorcism. A prayer, I'm talking to God. An exorcism, I'm actually addressing the devil. By the power of Jesus Christ, I command you. So I'm actually speaking to him. If I'm doing, and I've not done an exorcism. If I were, I'd be speaking to the devil 3 separate little occasions within the rite of exorcism. The rest of it, there are a few prayers, and the vast majority of it, reading Psalms and Gospels. So you mentioned scripture reading. That's what most of the rite of exorcism, most of the time, the priest is reading Psalms and Gospels. And then you've got a few times in there where he starts to address the devil in the name of Jesus Christ. And as one exorcist said, spend some time insulting the devil. Just call him liar, thief, murderer, some of the things that Jesus called him, they say father of lies and a murderer from the beginning, those things.
Yeah, sometimes transforming our mind is as simple as reading the scriptures, speaking them out over ourselves, and just really trying to, I always say, get God's word saturated into us. And it is funny how much especially, I don't know if this is a specifically Western thing, but how much our consumer mentality has gotten into how we even think of church and our faith experience. If I come to you for help and I don't like what you have to say, well, I'm going to call the other 5 priests in the town to see if I can get the answer I want, or again, no matter what it is, whether you're bouncing from job to job to job, or church to church to church, or counselor to counselor to counselor, one of the common denominators in all those situations is you. And in terms of, is there some core issue that you really need to work on? And so and some of that just comes with maturity and life experience. When you look back at some of the choices you made when you were younger, and you're like, oh, I was running from dealing with that, and hopefully you reach a place where you're willing to put down some roots and actually do the hard work of healing and working through those things. But so much fascinates me about how we operate as humans, and just trying to kind of protect ourselves from dealing with our junk, that we would literally need help, and look for the priest or the pastor who's going to give us the answer that we really want. That just seems kind of funny to me.
Yeah, and the answer a person wants, or just some. I mean, you're seeing people who are suffering, and they want it to end. And so, if I can't promise that, well, I'll find someone else who maybe can. A good instructor I had talking about mental health problems told us that it's like physical health problems, and the parallels can be overstated, but this was a good parallel. That we can't cure cancer every time. Sometimes we can manage it for a while, sometimes maybe even cure it, but sometimes the doctor can't do anything. And you're going to run into that with mental health problems. You might be able to really help a lot, help somewhat, and manage it. And there are going to be times you can do nothing. It's going to break your heart. And so you try. And so if a person's in that state and looking for some healing of a mental health problem, yes, keep trying, and we can try, but a prayer isn't always going to do it. Just like a prayer isn't always going to cause cancer. Keep praying for the person with cancer, absolutely, and for the person who's got this mental health struggle. But God never guarantees a miracle every time. As you said, it happens.
And Mike, in terms of whether it's the takeaway from this conversation, or somebody goes out and picks up a copy of your book on Amazon, in terms of kind of this overarching message of demons, deliverance, discernment, like, what's the takeaway? What do you hope every person hears when they encounter your content?
Oh, wow. When I did the dissertation, I guess the finding was, it was qualitative. So I just had interviewed a few exorcists. If there was a finding that my dissertation committee found interesting. It was the range within the Catholic Church of a range of opinion. As I said, those three signs, the exorcism ritual states, and then it says, and other ways of building up the evidence. Like, oh, they didn't tell us what that is. In other words, just saying, don't limit yourself necessarily to these, but it's very adamant. And they found this interesting too when I presented to the board that the Catholic ritual, especially this is in the instruction for the exorcist, especially he should not believe too readily that a person is possessed by an evil spirit. So, and this is back around the year 1600. So anyone says, well, back then they were so severe. No, they really, mental health wasn't discovered until 1900 and something, or till Freud. I've read about different cultures. They all knew there was a mental health problems, and a lot of them have spiritual beliefs too. And there's always been this interesting, which is it or both. So if there's a takeaway from the book, I would say don't jump too soon to think that whatever problem is an extraordinary activity of the devil, but it's probably going to involve ordinary activity of the devil. So take care of your whole health. I hospital chaplain full time. I spend whatever, about 40 hours a week talking to people and saying prayers for them. But I don't tell them now skip the doctor and nurse. No, listen to the doctor and nurse too and make your decision based on that. But why don't we pray also? So you want to cover both. So I guess if there's a takeaway, which is a really obvious one, you're thinking rightfully so. But yeah, the extraordinary things happen rarely. Don't jump to that conclusion. If you think you've got that going on, pray more. But cover the whole thing. You got a counseling. You might have I have found that it's helpful to people if they, whatever going on. You can't. It's hard to just tell someone, I think this is all a mental health problem, that they can get insulted. I ask, this just breaks your heart too. You know what? Did you have any trauma in your background, any abuse? Tell me about that. And it breaks your heart many times. They will have something and they'll tell you about it and say, okay, we need to take that into account. And the comparison I like to make, because it seems like everyone appreciates it. You know how when a soldier comes back from war and he can have flashbacks, he can have post-traumatic stress disorder, he can have some real mental health issues. That's not a criticism of him. That's saying, wow, you went through a lot. No, because the person, you went through a lot too. You might be having some of that. You realize how bad that was you went through? They're like, oh, they're getting some sympathy rather than you're crazy. And I mean that very sincerely, of course. Who looks at a soldier who's struggling with that and says, you're crazy? No one. Our heart breaks. My gosh, this man or woman went through terrible things. How can I help you? But we don't want to jump immediately to it's a devil doing it. Making it worse, absolutely.
Well, and the reality is, in terms of finding healing and wholeness, it's kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion. It's usually a to get to the point where you're having health issues, things are manifesting in your life, and I don't necessarily mean demonically manifesting. It was a journey to get there, and just like any journey back to repairing something or journey back to health, it can be a process. Experiencing healing and undoing, or if you've had multiple traumas, sometimes you get to a place where you deal with what's on the surface, and that gets you to a place of enough healing where you can deal with that next thing on the list. So again, it's we all want that microwave option, that quick fix, but it's often a journey and the road sometimes to work through multiple layers of things to get to a place of wholeness and healing. So in terms of the long-term road, the long-term journey, it's worth being willing to walk it out. And we all want that fast road, but I think like the more complete journey to healing, it takes time, and we got to be willing to put in the work.
And on that note, since we just celebrate Easter, the complete journey is not in this world. The full healing doesn't come in this world, as we know. So we'll make sure we're on the path and going to heaven. And that's where the complete is. We just had the resurrection. So that's where the complete healing is. Until then, we do what we can in this life. But knowing the complete healing doesn't happen in this life, mentally, physically, emotionally, that won't come in this life, but it will come.
That's definitely a good place to wrap us. I guess my response again to so many of these sorts of things is, the call is to live the normal Christian life, spiritual disciplines, pursuing God and moving in a direction like that. And it's a lifelong journey. And I love that you wrapped us kind of saying that the fullness of healing and wholeness, we'll experience that in heaven. It's not necessarily we're going to experience it in its fullness on earth at all. In terms of the book, widely available wherever great books are sold. It's time to bring this episode of the Sean Tavitt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Father Mike Driscoll. Once again, our book today was Demons, Deliverance, Discernment, Separating Fact from Fiction about the Spirit World. And Mike, I want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Great to talk with you.
It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you in the show.
Thank you. All right. God bless you and everyone listening.